Ethereum is fundamentally broken and has been for a very long time, and it can't upgrade easily. And it's not just consensus. That's just the thing that most people are looking at. Consensus is a problem because that's the most immediate problem. But once you fix consensus, then the EVM is a problem because that's slowing down everything. And then once you fix the EVM, then solidity is a problem because it sucks. See, one transaction on DeFi is not one transaction. One transaction on DeFi is 10 transactions, 50 transactions, because it's also interconnected. So if 2 million transactions per second is what the financial system needs today, and we know that one transaction is 10 transactions or 100 transactions, so you want to move finance onto an open system, then you need 10 million, 100 million transactions per second to be able to serve what we already have. If only 5% of the world's population or 10% of the world's population is currently using the global financial system today, and DeFi means that 50% of it can, then you need another 5x on top of that. So suddenly you're looking at 500 million transactions per second. We're talking about nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what is actually necessary for finance. So we can see where this is going.
Welcome to Crypto Corner, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. As I mentioned in the previous episode, today we're talking about a new project within the realm of DeFi, decentralized finance. In fact, this is a project that intends to remove the technology barriers limiting the expansion of DeFi by building a layer 1 protocol that directly addresses the technology needs of DeFi, both for today's applications and for the future of general financial services for the world. Well, the name is Radix, and they have a unique approach to scaling, which I will discuss in great detail with Piers Ridyard, the CEO of Radix, and a crypto veteran who shares a wealth of experience and insight into the crypto market as a whole. So it's going to be an interesting episode. Stay tuned. Okay, so let's start with DeFi first. I've been quite focused on DeFi for a while, and I featured here many projects that are building applications and services in the decentralized finance arena. This is, after all, one of the biggest growing sectors of crypto for the past couple of years. So we're going to take a deep dive into yet another cool new project, a very bold one actually, that will certainly drive a lot of buzz and interest around it. And most importantly, a lot of innovation, which is going to propel DeFi into the mainstream. You see, most of the applications that we have in DeFi today are built on Ethereum, and Ethereum for quite some time now has been hitting a brick wall when it comes to scaling. This has been going on ever since 2017, but with the advance in DeFi, and let's not forget the NFT sector too, there's even more pressure now on Ethereum network to process an ever-increasing number of transactions. Much like with Bitcoin, we have a race among users, and we're being ripped off on a daily basis, forced into paying higher and higher fees for our mundane transactions. Those who want to have priority pay a bigger fee. This took us from 2 or 3 cents per transaction a few years back to $20–30 per transaction just recently. I've seen even higher amounts when it comes to using DEXs, liquidity pools, and so on. In fact, the average transaction fee today is exactly 519% higher than it was just 1 year ago. Think about this. In just 1 year, we've seen a 500% increase in the charge, meaning we're overpaying in fees even for the most trivial of operations. DeFi operations and token swaps on DEXs are typically more expensive, especially the ones that are built on Ethereum. So why is it so difficult for Ethereum to scale? They're actually working on a few different proposals already, as you know, but this takes time, and so far we haven't seen anything come up that can actually catapult Ethereum to processing millions of transactions per second. 100,000 at best, but this is not really how DeFi or other applications in the Ethereum ecosystem can reach wide user adoption. It's 2021 already, and we are still talking about scaling, in fact, more than ever right now, as we are in desperate need of a better equipped network that can adjust to the growing interest and needs of the customer across the globe. This is where Radix finds its role. We're talking about a new type of network that offers a very cool approach that might just be the answer to these scaling issues. Radix is a layer 1 protocol and development framework designed specifically to serve decentralized finance. It employs a revolutionary approach to smart contract programming and developer incentives as well, coupled with a unique consensus protocol that solves the blockchain trilemma, as they call it, providing unlimited linear scalability while maintaining security and decentralization. This means that Radix is equipped to meet not just the needs of DeFi today, but the needs of the entire global financial market well into the future, and this is a really bold statement, I know. What they do differently is use a new form of a ledger, different to conventional blockchains. They take the leap to an improved protocol that we will explain in more detail in my chat with Piers Ridyard, but to give you an idea in simple terms, they've basically developed a new technology that is not blockchain. They use Cerberus, a new consensus algorithm that they built. Instead of mining blocks in a linear fashion, it splits the network into shards, basically breaking it to unlimited number of entities that can compute the data simultaneously rather than block by block, thus opening the door to a much faster transaction time or recording and confirming for each transaction. Something that crypto desperately needs right now if it's ever going to reach the mainstream and compete with processors like Visa or MasterCard or even PayPal for that matter. This offers scaling capability that none of the blockchains today can reach. And how is this possible? Well, here's what Piers shared with me on this question.
The financial industry right now does 2 million transactions per second globally, approximately. That's across all markets, and so like exchanges, money markets, stock markets, monetary transactions. If you include sort of like the big financial paydays in China, when people like go out and buy shopping online, some of those do 1 million transactions on their own in a day, which is crazy, right? It's like 1 million transactions per second at peak. And DeFi has given us a view on what that actually looks like when you make it DeFi. The difference between DeFi and traditional finance is DeFi is interconnected. So on Uniswap, if I do a transaction where I'm swapping USDC for ETH, and let's say I do it big enough to move the price, enough to trigger some arbitrage bots, enough to update the Oracle price, enough to trigger some changes in the futures contracts for options and derivatives around Ethereum versus USDC. One transaction on DeFi is not one transaction. One transaction on DeFi is 10 transactions, 50 transactions, because it's also interconnected. So if 2 million transactions per second is what the financial system needs today, and we know that one transaction is 10 transactions or 100 transactions, if you want to move finance onto decentralized finance, if you want to move finance onto an open system, then you need 10 million, 100 million transactions per second to be able to serve what we already have. However, what DeFi also does is it lowers the barrier to entry. It means more people can go and use decentralized finance. So if only 5% of the world's population or 10% of the world's population is currently using the global financial system today, and DeFi means that 50% of it can, then you need another 5x on top of that. So suddenly you're looking at 500 million transactions per second. And the projects that are saying, hey, we're high scalability, things like Solana, 50,000 transactions per second. That's not even a drop in the bucket of what we already do in finance. Looking at layer 2 solutions like Polygon, 7,000 transactions per second. We're talking about nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what is actually necessary for finance. So we can see where this is going. I don't think it's not known what DeFi will need to do. If DeFi is going to be what we think it's going to be, which is the underlying system for the global financial system, yeah, these are not even close to being the right numbers. So in answer to your question, how does Radix work? How does Radix achieve this massive degree of scalability? It really comes down to a key insight that we had early on, which is that on blockchains, what you're doing is you're ordering everything versus everything, right? So I have a block and it has a bunch of transactions in it, and then I have a next block and it has a bunch of transactions in it, and they are strictly ordered versus each other. So I could say that transaction A in this block came before transaction B in this block. That's fine, but actually not important. What you care about is if those two transactions were linked. So let's say that transaction A is spending some tokens and transaction B comes along and tries to spend the same tokens. You want it not to occur because transaction A came first. That's when you care about order. This came first and then this. You don't care about order. If, let's take the example of you send some money to your mother and I send some money to my mother, why does the ledger care whether or not my transaction came first or your transaction came first? It doesn't. It doesn't concern the same money. Completely parallel events. And this is the insight that Radix saw. We saw that the only order you care about are things that are related. And if they're unrelated, they can occur in whatever order they need to. That was the first piece of insight. The second piece of insight was that you could force the data, the way that you write transactions to the ledger, to automatically order things into buckets. So on Radix, we have 2 to the power 256 shards, which is about 10 times less than the total number of atoms in the known universe. So it's a very, very, very large number of shards. And every single transaction is automatically mapped to a shard. And then all of these nodes on the network service as many of the shards as they have the capability to do so. And what this means is that if a transaction is trying to spend the same money twice, it's always going to be served by the same nodes. But if a transactions concern different money, they will automatically be potentially on different nodes, or at least not necessarily to be ordered versus each other. And then the third insight that Radix had, if consensus didn't need to be run in order, then a node could run many consensus operations in parallel, right? So if I'm a node, I'm a big node, I'm serving lots of the shard space, and there's a transaction on shard 5 and there's a transaction on shard 10 and they're not related, I can run consensus in parallel on both of those transactions. I don't have to wait till I finish doing the consensus on shard 5 before I go and do the consensus on shard 10. They're not related, so I can run them in parallel. And so now what you get on Radix is you get partial ordering of related events and a massively parallel network that can process everything that is not related simultaneously, meaning that your throughput is basically limited to the computing power you can put on the network without breaking the really important parts of consensus, which is making sure that you can't double spend and you can't reverse historical transactions. The extra thing that this brings is that now you have enough space to store everything. You don't have a problem of state becoming too big, because the sharding of where all the transactions live also means that the amount of storage that a node needs is proportional to how many shards it's operating on the network.
Well, in fact, sharding is not a new concept. It's been around for a while and used in centralized data processors. It's also been one of the scaling proposals that has been floating around for a while for Ethereum, but there are complications with this method, and mainly how these separate entities will be able to communicate with and exchange information and data in real time with each other to make it possible for various DeFi operations to be executed fast. So Ethereum is taking its time with these proposals until they figure out how it will work seamlessly. And what Cerberus does is precisely this. It allows separate shards to exchange data so they can sync their records and facilitate fast processing of data transfers. If your trading DApp is on one shard and your transactions or funds are in another shard, you will need these shards to be able to communicate so that your exchanges or swaps or maybe lending or other DeFi activities can happen seamlessly. This is composability, allowing this data to flow and for these dApps on separate shards to communicate with each other. But Cerberus is actually very technical and much more complicated, and my goal is to simplify it as much as possible here. After all, why are linear scalability and atomic composability so important to DeFi, and how is double spend prevented in Cerberus? Here's Piers again.
We use a consensus algorithm called Cerberus, which is a 3-phase commit, and once it's committed, then it is considered final, right? And for that 3-phase commit, it's done according to a proof of stake algorithm. So if 2/3 by stake of the validators agree that that is a correct transaction, then the transaction is valid. And so to attack the network, you have to have 2/3 of the stake, essentially. Or to do a liveness break, you need 1/3, and to reverse history, you need 2/3.
All right, my next question was about the main concept, and when did this idea came about? How Radix was actually started?
In 2013, this was started as a project originally called eMooney or eMoney by a guy called Dan Hughes, who is the founder of the project and is heads up all of our R&D research. The original idea came from from seeing the promise of Bitcoin being this way of creating a decentralized, trustless way of storing value that clearly needed to exist for the world. But while its ambitions were very, very large, the technology itself was always going to be a constraint to how it could actually mean that everyone in the world could use it. And believe it or not, things like block trees and DAGs and different ways of doing consensus and all of this kind of stuff, as well as side chains and channels, that's all been discussed ever since 2013. And Dan saw that because these ledgers essentially are like the internet plus state, as in it has to store information. It can't just transmit information. It also has to store it. There was going to be this constant problem of both, where do you store the state to make sure that you can remember a world's worth of financial transactions, a world's worth of financial information, and how you come to consensus about that state. And so Radix started as this just very intense research and development project into the fundamental problems of consensus from the point of view of throughput and consensus from the point of view of storing state for everyone in the world. And that's eventually how Radix emerged.
The team behind Radix has always aimed at building a single decentralized network that can scale DeFi seamlessly to every single person on the planet. Well, they started with a deep dive into the mechanics of Bitcoin back in 2012, identifying that blockchains fundamentally couldn't scale. These conclusions then led to the beginnings of this project in 2013. So, as you see, this is not something that was built in a few months. It took years of writing the code from scratch and building what is essentially a completely original protocol and consensus mechanism. After all, the solution they needed was always going to be consensus. Their holy grail of consensus is Cerberus. Furthermore, they even created their own coding language, Scripto, thus offering a much more purpose-built solution to making the Radix network programmable and more appealing actually to developers. At the end of July, Radix is having the first public launch of the Radix network, which marks the genesis of both their mainnet and the native Radix token, XRD. The launch is called Olympia and will deliver the fundamental technology upon which the future of Radix will be built. 3 main pieces of software are being delivered as part of the launch: the Radix Desktop Wallet, a secure standalone wallet application; the Radix Explorer, a website that allows anyone to view the state of the ledger, such as details of addresses, transactions, token types, and validator nodes; and also the Radix node, which is an implementation of the core protocol of the Radix public network. Anyone can install the node and configure it as a full node, validator node, or archive node, depending on the intended usage. The goal for Olympia is to establish the Radix core technologies and to prove their stability before rolling out the more complex features later on. Olympia will focus on tokens, creating the native XRD token as part of the launch, but it will also provide developers with the tools to create their own tokens. About the Radix token, XRD, The total cap is actually set at 24 billion tokens, and these will be produced over a 40-year period. This is a proof-of-stake type of token and has also a deflationary model that some might recognize from the EIP 1559, which I discussed here on this channel previously. Basically, the transactions, when transactions are being processed, the fee that is payable is being burnt, which ultimately creates more scarcity. And it is a very appealing model in my opinion, especially for a token with a hard cap like XRD. There's also eXRD, the ERC20 representation of XRD on the Ethereum blockchain, which is already in circulation, and it will continue to exist as a permanent link between Radix and the Ethereum network. Now, the pre-sale price of this token was just 3 cents to the dollar, and today's price is 12 cents, which is already 4 times price appreciation. Holders of this token will be able to swap it for the XRD token when it's being launched. The bigger exchanges that already support Radix tokens are Bitfinex and Uniswap. Here's more about the token and its deflationary model and staking rewards from Piers.
We actually have had deflationary model in our system for a very long time, well before EIP 1559. But anyone who's familiar with 1559 will understand the concept behind this. But there's like 2 principal reasons for it, and one is in a highly sharded environment, it's actually much easier to burn the transaction fee than it is to aggregate up to all of the nodes that are running the network. But the other is that we think that it aligns the incentives of everyone in the network more closely, because you basically have an emission that is paid to the nodes for securing the network, and then you have a way in which the total available tokens on the network are reduced directly in association with the utility of the network, which we think balances things out quite nicely. There are 300 million XRD available per annum, and at current prices, that is about $39 million worth of rewards available per year. The total stake on the network initially is going to be quite small because it's only circulating supply that's available, and only about 35% of total circulating supply is actually available at the start. So that means that the rewards you're probably looking at around 38% per annum to start off with if you start staking to secure the network. One of the things that we understand is going to be necessary for DeFi to break into the mainstream is a way to work with regulation if necessary, right? I think that permissionlessness is always going to be a choice that people should always have, but if we want large institutions to use permissionless infrastructure but still be able to sit within their regulatory remit, then being able to work with KYC AML pools on permissionless infrastructure is going to be necessary. You can see this. Aave Pro is already experimenting with this idea of replicating exactly the same functionality of Aave on Ethereum, so not putting it behind a wall, but then saying, right, only wallets that have passed KYC AML can put funds in or draw funds out. Makes it easier for institutions and funds and things like that to be able to put money in as well. Now, I am neither positive or negative on that. I think that that's just a thing that's going to happen. However, that does increase the burden for developers to be able to build those functionalities out so that they can offer it. Now, Aave is obviously a very large project. It can afford to do these kind of things. What Radix has done is we've built this thing called Instapass, which is a way of developers being able to, if they want to, provide pro features on their DeFi applications without having to build the compliance stack. It just allows them to do one-click deployment AML KYC compliance so that they can automatically compete with things like Aave Pro and stuff like that, and rely on the heavy lifting we've done to make sure that there is compliance tools available for people who want to not just do permissionless DeFi but also want to play in the professional DeFi space as well. There's also our Scripto language. So we aren't using Solidity. Solidity has a very large number of problems associated with it. In fact, it's probably the main culprit for most of the $285 million of hacks we've had so far on Ethereum. it all directly comes down to the unsuitability of Solidity for building decentralized finance applications. So Radix is building a language for DeFi developers to be able to move fast and not break things. So fundamentally be able to build DeFi applications faster and more securely. And the way we've done this is actually gone and done it like you would build in let's say the Silicon Valley model of building product, in that you go and interview people and you go and ask them what their problems are. So we went and spoke to a large number of decentralized finance developers, both from leading projects and people who are trying to get started. And we have built a language that will be available at the end of this year that we think will 10x the ability of DeFi developers to actually be able to bring products to market that are secure and easy to deploy. We think that's a huge advantage for the industry, because at the moment we're basically trying to fight a battle with broken tools, is what DeFi is currently doing. And then the last thing that doesn't get spoken about much but will be a huge advantage on Radix is the Ethereum virtual machine. Many people don't realize that the Ethereum virtual machine is actually one of the main culprits that causes congestion and how slowly Ethereum goes. So many of your viewers will be familiar with Hashgraph, right? Hashgraph, in their throughput testing, can do 10,000 transactions per second. If you put Ethereum virtual machine on top of their network, it can do 15 transactions per second. So that's 10,000 transactions per second to 15 transactions per second. That problem is true for Avalanche as well. Avalanche, 2,500 transactions per second. Put Ethereum virtual machine smart contracts on there, you go down to like 30 transactions per second. It's really difficult to actually explain until you can see the benchmarks of how problematic the EVM is. What Radix has done is we built the Radix Engine. And the Radix Engine is designed to 100x the throughput of executing on these networks. So not only are we building a higher throughput network, we're also building a system that executes more quickly and more securely than what we have at the moment, because we realize that it's not just increasing the capacity of the system, but also increasing the efficiency of the system. So those are three things that I think not many people talk about Radix, but I think are really exciting.
All right, so that's pretty much everything about Radix. In regards to their ecosystem, it's early days, so they are starting with the launch of Olympia, and over the next months, the rest of the components will come into place.
Our mainnet goes live, but that's just going to be simple transactions and staking and unstaking. It's testing basically our consensus system and our data architecture before we put applications on top of it. At the end of this year, our smart contract language comes out. And then next year, what we call our Babylon release of our network will be when actually you can build full decentralized applications, DeFi applications on top of Radix. So we are not going through the process of building out our application ecosystem at the moment. If you want to know sort of how well connected we are in the industry, we founded the GoodFi Alliance. The GoodFi Alliance, we got in Aave as founding members. We got in SushiSwap. We got in Chainlink. We got in MStable. We got in. We've got a couple of big ones coming up. We've got in Avalanche. Like there's basically in terms of connection to the industry, pretty strong. What matters to building a successful ecosystem is your grassroots movement, is the people who actually have fun on your network first and foremost. If you remember back when Ethereum was first created, Ethereum was fun. Like it was fun to build Solidity. It was fun to play around with things. It wasn't too serious. And as a result, you got these really smart people who were just messing around and trying things for the first time. And that created the kernel, the very center of what the Ethereum community is today. We recognize that that's necessary from a strategic point of view for a public network that is introducing both a new execution environment, Radix Engine versus the EVM, and a new language, Scripto versus Solidity. So our main focus is making sure that we are focusing on developers who are like, just want to try out things, want to play around. They're going to be the first people who build tools, the first people who build applications on top of our platform. And that's really where our developer incentivization program comes in. And that only kicks off sort of towards the end of this year. So yeah, you look at our ecosystem, and there's some big names. There's a few big names like Chainlink and Ren and people like that. But fundamentally, that doesn't kick off until we know for a fact that the way that we're building our language and the way that we're building our developer experience justifies the hype that we're putting around what we want to deliver. And you can only do that not by paying big projects to come across and build on top of you, but by listening to your community and staying very close to the ground on the first applications that are built on top of the platform, out of love, not out of payment, but out of love. Like EOS spent $4 billion on trying to pay developers to build on EOS, and they've got nothing on their platform. And that's how you kill a platform very quickly, is just throw money at it and not understand your customer.
Well, as we see, this is a very community-driven project with a deep understanding of what the user needs and what they want. More importantly, their community is not only their user base. Developers are an important force in the Radix community, and they're encouraged and incentivized to build applications or components in the Radix ecosystem by being directly rewarded for the usage of their software. In other words, developers take royalties on individual components. So when people develop tools, applications, or other components, they get paid, and this way developers are financially compensated for their work too. And let's not forget Scripto, a programming language that is actually designed for DeFi.
On Radix, the way that you build is you have two concepts. The first is blueprints and the second is components. And blueprints you can think of like an on-ledger GitHub library. So what I do is I go, right, I'm going to create the concept of a token. And I write the concept of a token and I instantiate that as a blueprint. And now that's instantiated as a blueprint, I can then call that and say, right, I have a Piers token to be created. And my call to create a Piers token is only 4 lines of code. It's, I want it to be called Piers token. I want there to be 1,000 of them. I want it to be divisible by this, and I want it to be single issuance. And now every single time that you make a token, it's a single call on the definition of it, the blueprint, to create a component that is defined as the Piers token. This is massively more efficient, but what it also allows you to do is it allows you to create royalty that can flow from blueprints. So if a developer comes along, he's like, hey, I know what my project for this weekend is going to be. I am going to re-implement Uniswap on Radix. Let's say he doesn't actually want to build Uniswap, as in he doesn't want to go and find customers and instantiate it and work out how to do all the swapping. He's just like, I'm just going to go re-implement Uniswap on Radix. So he goes and re-implements the blueprint of a constant function market maker. And he says, right, every single time someone instantiates this, they pay me $1. And then every single time that's used, then I get, a couple of rad cents every time a user uses it. Now, a great marketeer comes along and he goes, right, I want to build Uniswap on Radix. Okay, cool. I'm just going to call the Uniswap, the constant function market maker print instantiate, happy swap, and it will be instantiated. And now I can go and do that. But the developer who built it gets paid a royalty every single time it gets used. And so what we've done on Radix is we've separated out this idea of people who build stuff and people who make businesses out of stuff. They can be the same, but they're often different. And developer communities rely on open source code and decentralized finance, but there's no way in which value flows to developers who give to the community but don't then make businesses on top of it. On Radix, we've radically changed that. We've completely rethought the way in which you can be a community member and be participating and helpful and get paid for that contribution without actually having to go all the way and create a business out of it. And so that's how we see. This is why we strongly believe that on Radix, we will reach feature parity with Ethereum very, very quickly. Because if you combine the ability to create decentralized finance applications really quickly with an easy to use language, plus an incentive to copy everything that works well on Ethereum, not even have to build the business off the back of it and still get paid for it. We think that that is a winning formula to get lots of people building on Radix very quickly.
With all this said, we can see how Radix is making a very strong proposition for building a superior network, one that addresses many of the current problems of blockchain and DeFi in particular. Here's one last excerpt from my chat with Piers. This is on how can Radix come on the forefront of the DeFi ecosystem.
Before, like, you'll have heard these examples plenty of times, but before Google turned up, everyone thought that Alta Vista had won the search race, or Yahoo had won the search. Before Facebook turned up, everyone thought that MySpace had won the social media space, and Blogger, everyone thought that blogging was dead, and then Medium came along. Like, fundamentally, the ability to win in these categories becomes harder along one axis as more happens, right? Because so you're fighting against incumbency. But on the other axis, it becomes easier because that incumbency comes with a huge amount of technical debt. Ethereum is fundamentally broken and has been for a very long time, and it can't upgrade easily. And it's not just consensus, that's just the thing that most people are looking at. Consensus is a problem because that's the most immediate problem. But once you fix consensus, then the EVM is a problem because that's slowing down everything. And then once you fix the EVM, then solidity is a problem because it sucks, right? And so DeFi has product market fit. So the way that Y Combinator defines product market fit is finding a hair on fire problem, right? If your friend has got his hair on fire, he doesn't care what he's going to have for dinner today. All he cares about is putting out the fire. And if you have a bucket of water, you are the number one most important thing to him. If you have a brick, he might take the brick and bang it on his head because it might just help put out the fire. And what we currently have is DeFi has a brick, and it's banging itself on the head, and we've got a bucket of water. And who's going to win eventually is the one that better fits the purpose. And Ethereum's fundamentally dead in the water as a result of it's a decentralized network. Upgrading it is massively difficult. Changing it is massively difficult. So yes, it will exist and continue to exist for a long time. But we have had the ability to learn from all of the mistakes that have come before to create something fundamentally superior to it, and we think we have.
Alright, well, this was everything for today's episode, guys. I hope this was interesting to you and it helps you in your research. Make sure that you use all of the links from the description below. This is where you're going to find the official website and all of the social media channels and other links that you will need to expand on your research. As I said, place this on your radar. Make sure that you watch this closely because this project, I feel, is going to explode. I mean, I have no doubt that this is going to be a very successful project from everything that I've seen and heard so far. It looks like we are dealing here with a really professional team, but not only team that knows what they're doing, they're actually looking into the future. They already know what they need to do in order to progress this, in order to actually continue for the next 10, 20 years rather than just what is today. And this is something that we don't really see very often. A lot of the times people are just building the same mode. They're repeating, they're building new ERC20 tokens or, projects that are based on Ethereum and stuff like that. There are, of course, projects that challenge Ethereum and that are trying to, kind of give it a run for its money, but none of them is actually scaling to the point that we're seeing from this project, which is actually placing it way ahead of all of the competition. So definitely keep an eye on this. Make sure that if you want to get involved, go join their social media channels and everything. Join the community as well as getting some of these tokens when they're being launched. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. If you liked it, share it with someone else who would also benefit from watching it. Leave a like and a comment below. Don't forget that everyone who leaves comments from now all the way until August is qualified for my crypto giveaway, my summer crypto giveaway. Ledger Nano S is only one of the top prizes. There will be more prizes. I am announcing them very soon, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and never miss an episode. This is everything from me. I'm signing off, and I will see you in tomorrow's episode.